Good morning and welcome to the webinar. We are delighted that our colleagues from Cypress College and North Orange Continuing Education, also referred to as NOCE, accepted the invitation and will be presenting on holistic supports for students with autism, intellectual disability, and mental health, establishing a wellness program. Before I officially introduce the team of presenters, please allow me to address a few logistical items. I am Will Francis, Project Director for Post-Secondary Education at the UCLA Tarjan Center. The Tarjan Center at UCLA is a federally designated Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities and your host for today's webinar. Support for today's webinar comes from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office, through a contract that enables us to provide technical assistance and training to community colleges, DSPS, who are working to provide equitable supports, services, and opportunities for students with disabilities, including intellectual disability and autism. A number of our colleagues are unable to attend today's webinar and have requested a recording of the proceedings. In order to facilitate a clean recording of the webinar, we have muted all calls. As we proceed through the presentation, our presenters would love to respond to questions that arise from or that naturally arise from the content of the presentation. We're asking that you insert your questions into the chat box throughout the duration of the webinar. We will address your questions and welcome you to submit as many questions as naturally arise. You may ask questions at any time, and we will reserve time at the end of the presentation for additional questions. This may be a good time to test the chat function. Please take this opportunity to enter a greeting into the chat box. I see that's happening. Thank you. There are a variety of non-academic factors that present barriers to student success. The COVID-19 pandemic likely aided our ability to observe some of these factors. We have heard that some of you have been flexible and nimble in responding to students' needs for additional services that may not have been available prior to the pandemic. Our presenters will share services that they offer and provide to students with autism, intellectual disability, and/or students with mental health needs. They will challenge us to think about resources that are available on our campuses that may practically be used to increase wellness and encourage student engagement. We will hear about a variety of stress management techniques and will be encouraged to explore opportunities to collaborate across our campuses. You will notice that this group of presenters are clear-eyed about some of the challenges that are emerging on our campuses related to COVID-19. And one of the best parts of this presentation, last but not least, is we will hear from students. We will get the student perspective based on their lived experiences. To all of our webinar participants, thank you for joining us today. And now I will provide some information about our presenters. Casey Sousa has worked in the field of disability services for 12 years. She's a disability support services counselor at NOCE, faculty coordinator for the ARISE program, and ARISE is academics, relationships, independence, self-advocacy, and emotional health. Casey received her Master's of Science degree in counseling from California State University, Fullerton. Last but not least, Casey is passionate about fostering an environment of wellness and belonging for students with disabilities. Alli Stanojkovic has worked in the field of disability for 11 years. She is currently a professor at NOCE, where she has been teaching full-time for the past 5 years, specializing in vocational training for students with disabilities. She received her Master of Arts in Clinical Psychology from Pepperdine University. Alli teaches both online and in-person courses. She wrote the curriculum for the NOCE Disability Support Services Department, and is a trainer for adjunct faculty and NOCE staff. Alli is passionate about providing access to education to students with disabilities. Christina Lakeman has worked in the field of disabilities for 9 years. She is currently an adjunct counselor at Cypress College for the Arise program. Christina received her Master of Arts in Marriage and Family Therapy from Chapman University and a Master of Arts in Educational Psychology from Alliant International University. She enjoys supporting students on their academic journey by creating a peaceful environment to chill out, recharge, and connect with others. One of our students, Cecilia Kupul, is a first-year Cypress College student pursuing a career in nursing. She enjoys spending time with her daughter when she is not in class. Cecilia has experience working with children with disabilities and is an active member of the Arise social group. And our second student, Daniel Ramos, has been a student at NOCE for the past 5 years. He plans to graduate from NOCE next year. Daniel is currently working at Dickie's Barbecue and wants to continue the dream by going to culinary school in the future. Daniel likes to inspire and encourage his peers. In his free time, he enjoys spending time with friends, doing art and being creative, and is currently learning Japanese. And now, without further ado, here's Casey Sousa to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Will. I always love hearing the bios. I'm like, oh, these people are so great that we get to work with, and our students are wonderful. So I don't know, we can be done with the presentation and just walk away. Just kidding, Will, just kidding. So welcome, thank you so much for coming today. And we are, like Will said, we want your questions. We've put together this presentation, but if we don't get through half of it, because you guys have wonderful questions that we can engage with, I know it's harder on webinar, but we really want you guys' participation. So if you have questions as we go, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'd also love for you guys, just based on kind of the teasers you got about what we're presenting, to put in the chat some things you're hoping to learn, or things you're hoping that we cover today. And that way, if we don't have them, we can just do it real quick and pretend like we did, so that we can cover what you guys are hoping to learn. So feel free to use that chat box. Alli is going to monitor the chat for us. We love to be interrupted. We really want you guys to participate and get out of this what you're hoping to get out of it. So use the chat with reckless abandon is, I guess, what I'm saying here. So like I said, welcome. I'm Casey. We're so happy to be here today. I put together a slide of introductions, but Will did such a wonderful job that I'm just going to go right past that one and talk to you a little bit about Arise. So Arise stands for Academics, Relationships, Independence, Self-Advocacy, and Emotional Health. And where Arise came from was a bunch of years ago. Our former director, Denise Simpson, and a lot of our regional K-12 groups and partners from our North Orange Community College District got together and said, we really need to form together as a group and look at what the needs are of our students who are transitioning from K-12 into the community college system or post-secondary. And one of the huge needs that they all recognized many years ago was services for students with autism and similar areas of disability that are coming up through the K-12 system and then seem to be falling through the cracks in the post-secondary realm. So Arise was kind of born out of that idea that it might not always be academics that are helping or that are preventing students from being successful. And there might be a lot of other barriers that are keeping students from persisting and graduating and also finding employment. So we wanted to create a place that we could provide those supports for students who were coming up into post-secondary for the first time out of K-12 and often not getting a lot of the same supports that they got in the K-12 system. So Arise was born out of that, and we created it to be a place where students could come and have a lot of those needs met. A lot of at the beginning, we were focused primarily on students with autism and what their specific needs were. So we geared the Arise centers to really supporting students with autism. And what we quickly learned was that the supports we were providing were supports that really benefited all students. I would be working with my colleagues and saying like, man, I wish I had this access to this service in college, or I wish I had a place when I was in college that I could go for some of these extra supports. So it is open to all students, but we do kind of cater our services, or when we are developing new services, we think about what are those services that students with autism, intellectual disabilities, mental health, what are some supports that those students could benefit from. So it is a safe space for students to come. It's sensory friendly. We offer a lot of different services. It's walk-in, so students can come into the physical rooms anytime they want. They don't need an appointment. We have staff there. And as you can see from the pictures, we've, in the last couple years, actually right before COVID, so the timing was kind of terrible, redid all of our rooms and got rocking chairs and kind of more comfortable furniture, so that when students came in, it wasn't like they were walking into a classroom or you know, a counseling office. It was a little bit different and looked like a little bit more of like a casual place where students could be. So now that we are back on campus part-time, we have these rooms open, and then we also offer virtual services. So we'll get into our virtual services in a minute, but I just wanted you guys to kind of have a picture of what our physical spaces look like. And we want to go through this presentation and really offer some ideas that anyone can do. So we've been really fortunate to get a lot of braided funding that we can support these rooms, but we recognize not everybody has those type of resources or access to that funding. So I'm giving you guys a little bit of a history of Arise, but the majority of our presentation we're hoping is going to be really practical things that all of you can say, hey, if I have one or two people on my campus that are willing to engage and provide some of these supports, we can do this whether or not we have this additional funding. So some of the things that we do in Arise, we offer support for students with executive functioning, skill development. So we'll have students come in with a syllabus and say, you know, I'm not sure how to plan out my semester. So we'll go through and write down, okay, when you have this assignment due, let's back it up a few days and you're going to start working on it here. So just helping students with some of those basic executive functioning and academic skills. We do not do tutoring. Any of my staff will laugh when I say this because I do not do math. That is not anything close to my strong point. But I can help somebody in a math class organize their materials. So that's what we share with students, is that we're here to kind of help you be a successful student, but we don't do tutoring and those other sources, but we can plug students in with those resources, which is another really important part, understanding your campus resources. We do social groups with students. We do virtual activities where we do social groups, game nights, and we're going to get a little bit more into detail with that. But it's just really a place where we want students to feel comfortable on campus, coming in, getting the supports that they need. We talk a lot about relationships and boundaries and just all those things that go into making a successful student. And Alli and Christina, if I leave anything out, feel free to unmute and jump in. Okay. And I talked a little bit about our funding. We have had some very creative directors and faculty that have been able to braid a lot of different funding to provide these services and to get the resources to set up our rooms and our staffing. So our regional consortium, our North Orange County Regional Consortium for Adult Education, is one of our funding sources through the California Adult Education Program, or CAPE. This is a big test if I know all my acronyms, so if I fail, don't tell anybody. And then our school, North Orange Continuing Education, or NOCE. And then we have recently partnered in the last couple of years with our sister college, Cypress College, to provide students for Cypress, or provide services for Cypress students as well. And we'll get a little bit into that later on in the presentation, but that's been an awesome move for us and a great collaboration with 2 different institutions to be able to provide the service for our students. Okay, so Alli is going to take us through some non-academic barriers to student success. But before we get into that, we wanted to take a second and allow you guys to put in the chat some things that you guys have recognized or seen on your campuses that are non-academic barriers to student success. So we'll give you guys a minute to put some things in the chat. We want to see if you come up with some of the same things that we've seen and experienced. Okay, so no in-person classes, social skills, transportation, mental health support, access to internet or computers, emotional regulation, misunderstanding directions or communication, overprotective families, communication. You guys are rolling them in now. Self-advocacy, food insecurities, following assignment directions, time management, that's a big one. Executive functioning, lack of motivation, stress, I think is what that was meant to be. Being reticent to talk to teachers, that's a big one. Communication, we're going to talk about. Anxiety, self-advocacy skills. Okay. All right, feel free to keep putting things in the chat. We're gonna keep moving, but keep putting them there, and then we'll see if you guys have some of the same slides that we do. All right, Alli, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and as these were coming through, I was thinking so many of these barriers existed before the pandemic, and now, you know, maybe it's heightened because of what we've been experiencing throughout the pandemic, but also just in general, we are in students' homes nowadays, you know, so I, like Casey mentioned and Will, I teach online and in person. So online, we lead a Zoom session or 2 Zoom sessions for our classes and invite students to come. It's not mandatory, but for the most part, we have high attendance. And I think it's because, well, it started with just students wanting to learn how to access their information. But now I think so many of the things that you guys are highlighting in the chat is making students want to come. So it's that social piece or wanting the connection. I saw some references to mental health and things like that. Definitely just wanting to belong. So that is something that we see now in those Zoom sessions. You know, this morning I had a class right before this, and normally he doesn't share too much, camera off, and he unmuted himself and gave us a tour of his catio, not kidding, and 2 kittens running around and was exploring all these things. I just was thinking, like, it's so interesting because if we were in the classroom, I would have never seen this side. And it was really, really cool. So anyway, going into some of the barriers that we see are, you know, some of the big ones. So outside relationships. And I try really hard not to read off of a slide. I know you guys are probably already ahead, read through all of these, but I'm just going to kind of allude to them and go over some examples. So again, so the outside relationships, we can't account for everything that's going on outside. And so many of us, you know, even those of us that are working at the, you know, education level. So we're also have a lot of things going on. Students have a lot of things going on, off days as well. Then there's the executive functioning, study skills. It's hard to be a student. Some of those basic skills that, you know, quite frankly, aren't covered as much. So it's people that don't know how to be a student, and that could be really challenging. Communication, students come in and they don't know who to communicate with. It takes a lot of guts. I know we all know, to be able to ask questions. You don't want to seem like it's a stupid question, or maybe you don't know how or when to ask. The advocacy at the college level, students are advocating for themselves. We try so hard, at least in our classes and in our program, to make sure that the students in the driver's seat of their goals. So, you know, we ask that they're going to miss class. We want them to reach out to us. And it's really because we want to start to develop this rapport with students early on, where they can feel comfortable asking questions should something else come up. So communication's a biggie, talking about like expectations. So students need to know clearly what the expectation is for the class, or, you know, the accommodation, the program, what have you, but making sure that it's really clear and really firm, and not in a rude way that, you know, you can't make specific accommodations for one person, but just like that they're not going to change, so that the student can expect that that's going to remain the same. Mental health support. So even though not all of us are mental health professionals, I definitely, when I'm in the class, there's a few times where things will come up and I feel like, oh, I'm putting on my counselor hat. But really, it's more of recognizing what kind of resources exist outside of the classroom where you can kind of give a warm handoff to the student to make sure that they can access that. So we're not overstepping as well. Intersectionality, I told Casey yesterday that could be a whole presentation in and of itself, but it's definitely a barrier. And then social belonging. So I think that's why some people will gravitate to the online classes if they have a Zoom session and come to the Zoom session, even if it's camera off, just so that you're a part of something. And then on campus, same thing. I mean, that's a big part. I also am working pretty deep into a curriculum rewrite. And so I feel like the curriculum is so important and I'm so excited about it. But really, at the end of the day, I know so many of our students are coming because that is the social piece for them. And then also family support, behavioral issues, and motivation. And I feel like that right there was so many of the other things that you put in the chat, because yeah, I mean, there are so many things that happen from the point that our students wake up to the point that they either join a class or get to school, the amount of buses that they're taking, and just there's so much red tape and challenges and hurdles that are going on, and we can't pretend that that's not a thing, but we also can't fix it all. So it's trying to figure out a way to provide resources for students to access if and when they want.
And some of the things that you guys touched on in the chat are the same things that we've experienced, that our students are experiencing. I saw a few things that popped out that were things I was planning on providing examples for, but helping students learn how to communicate with their instructors and with school staff to communicate what their needs are. And that's something that we do in Arise a lot, is work with students. We do role plays, and we might say, okay, we have a student that might come and say, oh, I don't understand this assignment. Can you help me with it? And my response usually is, well, I'm not in your class, so I don't know what the assignment is either. But you know what? Let's figure out a way that, like, first of all, let's read the directions. Let's look through the syllabus, see if we can find that answer on our own. But if not, sometimes it is confusing. Sometimes the assignment isn't super clear. So we'll role play. Okay, well, what can you do to reach out to your instructor to ask for clarification? Or are there peers in your class that you can work with? And I think that being able to support those students in developing that communication skill is really important, especially in college. I saw somebody else put in the chat the difference between high school and college. And that is a huge one that my team works with students on a lot, is going over what those differences are. In high school, I've heard people present before that have said, in high school, there's some lady that comes and tells me when I'm going to go take a test in another room, or my teacher just implements these things for me, or a meeting is held and then everybody decides what my supports are going to be. And as we all know, in college, it's very different. You need to actively seek out the accommodations and supports that you need. And somebody just doesn't provide all of that for you. So that can be a big adjustment for our students. So those are important things to go over with students as well when you're meeting with them. And that's something that we can do in any role that we have, is talk to especially new students and say, hey, do you know where to go to get DSS services? Do you know how to talk to your instructor about your accommodation letter? I've had students that have told me before, well, you sent my accommodation letter to my instructor. I said, yes, I did. Awesome. You were there with me when that happened. Did you check in with your instructor? No. So, it's kind of talking about some of those things. And I think that those are things our students aren't always prepared for, and that's not their fault. So we want to make sure we're checking in with them on those things. It's easy for me to forget that people don't always know how it's different in college versus the K-12 system. I've also had students, especially our students with autism, that may struggle a little bit more with executive functioning. I had a student that completed assignments and then didn't turn them in. And the student said, well, I did them all. I learned the information. So kind of just walking through those steps. Yes, you need to complete the assignment. You also need to turn in the assignment. Or I've had students say that they don't need to do the work because they already know the information. So if they don't know it, they'll do the work. But if they already know it, they don't feel like they need to do the work. So I think these are things that sometimes they may be study skills that other students have developed, but we need to be checking in with our students to say, do you know how to submit your assignments? Because that can be different in college versus high school, especially if you're doing online classes for the first time. And I'm going to pause real quick and scroll up. I think something just caught my eye in the chat, getting students engaged with their disability service specialist before they're having difficulties. That is a great one. I tell my students all the time, 2 weeks before the end of the semester is not when you want to be making sure your accommodations are set up. Our accommodations alternate media specialist, if she was here, she would probably tell you of all the millions of times she's had students coming to her at the last minute. Oh, I have a test tomorrow. And that's just part of being a successful student, is being sure that you can get those services arranged ahead of time, which is difficult for all of us. You know, my colleagues here and my staff would be the first to tell you that I can be a really last minute person. That's not my strongest characteristic. So that's something I'm working on too, is making sure that, you know, I have what I need. So how do we do that? Let's sit down and write it out. Do a checklist for what you need for your semester. So those types of things are things that are really important to go over with our students before they're in that situation where they're kind of in that crisis. And then, like Alli said, intersectionality is something that we could do a whole presentation on, and I'm not nowhere near ready for that today, but it is something that we need to consider, and that goes into mental health services, you know, not only providing a referral for mental health services, but a mental health specialist that has experience working with individuals with disability, autism, intellectual disabilities, because that can be very difficult to find. And then I feel like students get frustrated because they don't get the support they need, and then they think, oh, well, this doesn't work. So that's just a really important thing to consider, and have conversations with our students about different things that affect their ability to be successful. And Christina, I don't know if we've missed anything that you've seen on the credit side that you see as different barriers than what we're kind of sharing, if you want to share anything.
No, I agree with what you said about expectations of students coming in from high school to college. There is such a big difference, and not only for the students, but I think sometimes the parents as well. They think that they, you know, will be able to oversee their students' education, which they can from a further away, but they're not able to directly communicate with people unless their student is with them, and knowing that the student is in charge of their education and their decisions can be kind of tough for families to take. So it is really important. I feel like communication is a really big thing that we work on in Arise with all students, and just being able to advocate for themselves and speak up, and making it a safe space for them to practice those skills so that they can be more independent when they go out to their classes and talk with their instructors.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Christina. Okay, then we had a couple comments in the chat about differences in accommodations in high school and college. And yes, that's a huge one. We partner a lot with our K-12 programs and in our local area, and we do presentations and talk to students about that, because there is a big difference. And a lot of times parents have had to fight so hard to get supports and accommodations for their students. And then when we come in and say, you know, we'd encourage you to start backing off of some of those supports because they're not going to get those same supports in college, that can be really deflating and frustrating. And so I think a big part of that is being in communication with parents and trying to get into good relationships with the K-12 system so that you can go and make those presentations. You can give them that information, talk about what kind of typical accommodations you see in college that students may have gotten in high school that they are not going to get in college. And that's where I think those collaborations are really important in developing those relationships with the community partners and the K-12 systems so that you can kind of have those informational sessions and you can get that information to the families of the students. And then Lindsay, you asked a question about deadlines and how your school did away with deadlines. Could you give a little bit more information of what kinds of deadlines you're asking about? I'm not sure which, if you're talking about deadlines on the college side or the K-12 side. Okay, so go ahead and put that and we will for assignments. Okay. Yes, so, oh, I get it. Okay, so your K-12s don't have due dates for the assignments and the students can just turn them in whenever. Is that kind of what we're getting at with that? Okay, yes. Yeah, and I have a good friend who's got a high schooler and my kids are still elementary school, so I haven't gotten into the high school world yet. But she was saying a similar thing and I said, well, how can you do that? How can you just do away with deadlines? But that piece I think is where the executive functioning comes in and working with our incoming post-secondary students and sitting down with them and saying, okay, there are deadlines, and if you don't make your deadline, you don't get credit for the assignment. It's not that you get an extension, and that can be up to the professor, but really driving the point home to our students that when something is due, that means that it has to be done then. And if you have accommodations, that doesn't mean that you get to turn it in late or that you don't have a due date on that. The due dates don't change. You get accommodations to support the assignments. So I think that sitting down with students and I get made fun of all the time because I have an actual paper calendar, but I need to sit down and write them out so that I can see kind of a monthly overview. And I know Canvas and a lot of other tools can show that for students that want to do that electronically, but really mapping out when you're going to start on an assignment, when you're going to have a chunk done, and then when it's going to be due is really important to help our students develop those skills.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, when it comes to, and Casey, you brought up the syllabus, and I feel like when it comes to college, the syllabus is the map. I mean, that is what the class is going to cover and when and what. And even though it says on it that things could change, I really like to, so I'm an instructor. So from my perspective, I like to sit down with the students the first couple of classes and kind of just have them, hey, what are we supposed to work on today? And make sure that they see the due dates. We use Canvas, that's our learning management system. I like Canvas because it will show you when things are due. I don't mark students down for turning things in late just because, again, we're all living through a pandemic. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but they can tell if something's past due, which from an ASD perspective is, I'm sure, a nightmare because it's like red and it has a grade, but it holds them accountable. And I like to really make sure that they can see like, hey, this is the map, this is what we're going off of. I don't have any tricks up my sleeve. Just kind of to reiterate, so if it's new, because in K through 12 there weren't any due dates, I write due dates on the board. On Zoom, we'll talk about due dates. We talk about them beforehand. So I understand that that's a tricky thing to learn. I also am just naturally definitely a procrastinator. And you'll see like sticky notes and things, and I'll talk to students. I'm like, hey, I have a sticky note because I've got a deadline today. And I just like to model it as well. But I think it's really important. And I realize not everybody, maybe a syllabus doesn't make sense. Our syllabus, our universal syllabus is quite long. I think it's like maybe 10 pages. But it is good for students to see what to expect, and it's a clear expectation. And to help them break it down. I do naturally online or in person 3 check-ins a semester. So at the beginning, we'll go over when things are going to be due, what to expect. And then we'll typically like at the halfway mark, we'll have a week where it's pretty light on work, but it's like you have an assignment to check your grade. what's your grade? Because I want them to know how they're doing and how they're progressing. Canvas makes it really easy to see like what's missing, if something's missing. They see their participation points. I give them a score for, well, whatever. Anyway, so they're able to track all of that. And it also will show them, is there something missing? Or like I said, anything that might be past due or that was turned in late. So anyway, I try to create these spaces for them where they're the driving force to see their grade and to be in control. Because I hate, I have a student that like goes and meets with a counselor and they come back and they're like, thanks, I'm doing really great in my class. And I'm like, you should know that. Like, I'm glad, I want you to get the positive reinforcement, obviously, but really, I want the students to know that, because then when we're talking about somebody who might be struggling, I don't want it to be a surprise at the end of the semester. And it's probably not a surprise to the student, but at the end, hey, I didn't pass, I might be retaking this. I want them to know as we move through it. So due dates, I'm very firm on, but like I said, I try to make sure that they know really what that means before we get started on anything.
I just wanted to add too that from the credit perspective, there's also introduction to counseling classes available for students. So when they first come in as a first-time student, they can take these classes where they're given the tools to understand what a syllabus is and how to read it and how to navigate it, tips on how to be successful in college. And then just also at Cypress College, I know this isn't specific to Cypress, but they also have like first steps programs, which are transitional programs. So look into some of those programs that might be available at the college that your student is interested in attending, because there might be some transition classes that they can take, or just options to help them make it over smoother without having to run into those barriers of like, what is a syllabus, which can be really daunting when you first start.
Okay, so resources for student wellness. This is why we're all here. What can we do to help our students in these non-academic barriers? So one of the things, if you don't have a space like Arise where you can have students come in and have a relaxing, low stimulus environment, I would encourage you guys to walk around your campuses and find places that are quiet and peaceful. I've walked our campus a few times thinking, if I was really upset or stressed out, or if I was a student that was just experiencing a lot of stimuli on campus, where could I go? And it's interesting when you change that perspective for yourself and you kind of view yourself as that student, you find little spaces that maybe you've never seen before. I was walking around Cypress campus one day and I took like a little cut through these two buildings, and there was all this grass and there was a bench and there was these green trees and it was just beautiful. And I thought, I've been here for years and I've never seen this before. So that's a big one that I think is a good thing to do if you're thinking, wow, I would like to provide some of this for students, but I don't have the space. Spaces, we all know space on college campuses is so difficult. So walk your campus, look for places that you could tell students, hey, you know what, I found this place. If you're feeling stressed out, let's take a walk. We can go over here. I can show you this space where it's a little bit more quiet, or where you can kind of get some of that downtime for yourself. And then for our virtual services, and I know most programs at least now have to have online programs, even if you didn't before, but offer some of those services virtually. We in Arise do virtual mindfulness sessions, and my team, Erica and Haley, who I meant to mention at the very beginning, were going to join us for this presentation and have collaborated a lot with us on this work and are absolutely amazing, but couldn't be here today because they had to work in our Arise programs. We had some scheduling difficulties there, but they have done a wonderful job of finding all kinds of different mindfulness videos and offering sessions. And we're going to get into some stress relief or some ideas for stress management in a little bit, but they've been able to provide those virtually as well, which is great because all of us are zoomed out. All of us are sick of being on computers, but if you can turn your screen off and sit at your desk, or even like lay on the floor and walk through a mindfulness activity with a group, it can be really helpful. And then you're not feeling awkward. When we're in groups in person, And we're like, okay, everybody close your eyes. And then like somebody's peeking because they're like, is everybody really closing their eyes? This is kind of awkward. So it can actually be a really great thing to do online, because students aren't feeling like they're being watched, and they can kind of be a little bit more free with some of those activities. Some of the things that we're looking to do more in the future are collaborating with the physical education departments. We haven't done this yet. I've been talking about it for a really long time, and hopefully we'll be doing it soon. But you know, partnering with the school's yoga instructors or people that do basic movement classes, and collaborate with them to offer, you know, yoga on the lawn, or just some basic stretching types of things, because if we can get our bodies moving, a lot of times that can help us with our stress management. So that's a big one, just with collaborating with other departments and saying, hey, would you be willing to host an event for us? And a lot of times, you know, departments are really excited about doing those things. It's just that we have to kind of make those connections and then offer them for students. We put applications on here, like phone apps or different things that you could put on an iPad. I know most of you have probably heard of Calm and just some of the different apps that you can download for free, so that students can walk through some of those mindfulness activities on their own. If you have resources to have iPads that students can borrow when they're with you, that you can download some of those things on, that can be super helpful. I believe that Calm actually has a free program for K-12s, and we tried to get it and they said no, because we're not a K-12. So if any of you guys are K-12 partners and you don't have that resource, you could look into that. But some of those are just really easy things that we can help our students learn, so that they can access it anytime they need to, and they don't need us to do that. And there's also really great apps for staying organized and on task that we can teach students how to use and access. And a lot of times our students teach me how to do that, and I don't know a lot of those things, and they're like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool, but have you ever seen this? This is way better than what you're telling me. So just even having those conversations with our students, we can learn a lot about resources to share with other students. And then a colleague of mine the other day suggested providing quiet hours for high traffic areas on campus. And I thought, that's great. I've never even thought of that. So I would take all the credit for it, but I think that he's actually in this presentation as an attendee, so I can't take the credit for it. But seeing if, you know, in the student centers or cafeterias or just typically high traffic areas, if they would be willing to implement quiet hours, so that if a student feels like, wow, I'd love to go into the student center, but it's just so loud and overwhelming and there's just always activity going on, maybe they'd be more able to engage in that activity if it was a little bit more quiet. So I think that those are things that we can consider as we look at our campus through that lens of, what if I were a student that was feeling overwhelmed, that was feeling stressed out, that was overstimulated? What would be things that would help me? So we wanted to kind of take a minute also, and if you guys have ideas or if you are already doing things that we haven't talked about, to share those in the chat, because we would love to see what you guys are doing, and also be able to share those resources. So we're gonna give you guys a minute to add those in the chat. So breathing exercises during class to keep students present and relaxed. That's awesome. I think Alli's going to touch a little bit about that in a minute on some in-class activities. Frequent breaks in lectures. Yeah, I've had students before that have come to me and said, when the instructor says, do you guys want a break or do you want to just keep going so we can get out early? Okay, when I was in college and they would say that, I'm like, out early. I don't ever want to stay late. But I think a lot of times we don't think about what that might be like for a student who really does need a break. And they don't feel comfortable saying that, especially when everyone else in the class is saying, no, we just want to get out of here. So I think as instructors and staff, that's something that we can really do to help our students out, is to force them to take that break. Because a lot of times, if I'm the only one that needs a break, there's no way I'm raising my hand and saying that, but I might be zoned out the rest of class because now I can't focus. Okay. Courses that are not primarily lecture only, but allow for engagement in small group discussions. Specific types of breathing sympathetic controlling the fight or flight response. Yeah, that's great. A lot of our students too, and myself, I think when I first started learning about different breathing techniques, I was thinking, it's just breathing. Like you hear about that all the time. Take a deep breath, and you don't really feel like it's that effective. And then you learn, wow, like the science behind it, it actually really does calm down your whole nervous system. So learning different strategies to control that is really important. Okay, different types of excitement. A lot of things you guys are talking about are really a lot of concepts of universal design for learning, which again is a whole nother presentation that there are probably many attendees very qualified to present on. Fidgets, yeah, that's a huge one that a lot of students, in Arise, we have a lot of fidgets that students can come and they can take them to class with them if they need and bring them back. We haven't had too many walk away yet. So that hasn't been a big problem. But and then a lot of students will come in and see different fidgets and then they'll buy them on their own when they think, oh, this is something that really works for me. Okay, so feel free to keep posting your ideas in the chat there. We are going to move on to our student engagement. All right, so some of the things that we came up with, and I know Christina and Alli, you guys have some things to contribute here too, so feel free to unmute and interrupt me at any point. But virtually, I know that's a big thing as keeping students engaged in the online community. So some of the things that, again, my awesome team, Haley and Erica, have really gotten the virtual game events down to a beautiful science and put on some awesome events for our students. And the virtual game events, we found out really quickly, were so highly attended. And we think it was because students, it's not an academic activity or like a forced awkward situation. It's just something that's really fun. And we have virtual game events. We'll do staff versus student events, and we do Jeopardy style games and just all kinds of different things. But it allows students, they can come for 10 minutes if they want, they can come for the whole hour. And it's just a fun activity that doesn't require a lot of, it doesn't require the students to be really on it or to feel like they have to be presenting in any certain way. And our staff have put on, like Halloween themed ones where you can come in costume and we'll vote on the best costume and that person gets a prize. Or, during the holiday season, we have holiday themed events. So really getting students engaged in the virtual community, I think, is really important as well. We do offer virtual study sessions. So again, we're not doing tutoring, but if a student is saying, man, I had this problem so much at the beginning of the pandemic was, well, I'm home all day, I'll get around to it at some point, and you don't set aside time to do things. So if a student knows, oh, there's a virtual study session today, a lot of times students will just log on, turn their camera off, and they just do work for that hour because it's time that they have set aside to do their work. And then if they have a question or if they want to go through a syllabus on something, they can ask one of us, hey, I just had a quick question on how you think I should do this, or what do you think this means? And we can provide help and resources with that. And then just having virtual open office hours where students can pop in and ask a question if they need to, ask for resources, support, anything like that. I think a big way to help foster belonging for our students is to get them engaged in volunteer service opportunities on campus. At NOCE and at our sister schools, we have a food pantry. So we encourage a lot of our students to volunteer at the food pantry, volunteer in the library, just try different things so that you can get engaged in a campus community that's outside of DSS. And I know for all of us, that's true. It's harder sometimes when we're not engaging with service to other people to feel that connection and belonging. But when you start doing that, you feel much more like you're part of a community. So I think that's a big part for our students. And something that often gets overlooked for students with disabilities is providing those opportunities to serve other people and to be involved in something that's really meaningful and purposeful. Okay.
And I think one thing that we should add is some of the things that we're talking about that we're doing on campus, especially the game events that we've put on, or that Arise has put on, rather, cannot take credit for that. That is from a non-credit standpoint, our students, we don't have clubs or things on campus for most of our students, with the exception of our Cypress College students, of course. But so this was a way that opened up kind of the social floodgates for students. And I know scrolling through the chat, a lot of people have said like there's not social opportunities, especially from a community college. A lot of people are commuting and that kind of thing. So this was something that Haley and Erica started doing. And oh my goodness, I feel like it's the most attended thing that at least I've seen. And yeah, it's just because it's them getting to socialize and interact with one another. So.
Yeah, and getting our students involved in student leadership is really important also. That's a big focus that we're working on right now, is getting students on, at board meetings, and students on these committees and these consortium groups that are making these decisions and that are big parts of getting resources for our students. But we need students to be a part of those, because I can't speak in this point in my life as a student with a disability on a college campus what my needs are. I can see what I think my students' needs are, but we really need to be involving our students more in those types of things. And as I was kind of talking through this with some of my peers the other day, one of them said to me, it's like I think I said, it's like that nothing about me without me. And he said, well, yeah, but now it's nothing without me. It's not even nothing about me without me. It should just be nothing without me. Our students need to be visible in these areas where people are making decisions, and they need to be visible on campus, and they need to be in environments where they can speak to what their needs are. And that's a big part of advocacy as well, is helping our students to develop those skills and be involved in those things. And Christina, do you want to touch a little bit about some of the lunch activities and student groups?
Sure. So we have students often come in during their lunch hour, where they will come in as a group or come in individually. And then we'll have like a social hour. So we'll have time to talk about different topics, like things that are happening in the world, or if anybody has anything specific to them that they wanted to talk about and get some feedback on. It gives students an opportunity to work on their social skills, and they also have an opportunity to make new friends and get to learn about other people. So it's just a great way for students to get together and connect with one another. And then I also wanted to add that something that we've been doing, because I work at the Cypress Arise office, we have a whole board of like a bulletin board of activities that are happening at Cypress College. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about collaborating with different departments on campus. But one of the great things that Haley and I have been working on at Cypress is just talking to different groups, and they've all been really open to letting non-credit students into their credit activities and events. So just finding different types of things that are available on your campus. And if it's not there, maybe trying to help create them with a group of people, and starting your own kind of thing is really helpful for students.
Okay. So now is our best part of our whole presentation, because it's not us doing anything. But we wanted you guys to be able to hear from our students and to hear some of the ways that they have utilized Arise, and just some of the things that they've gotten out of the program. So I'm going to have Daniel and Cecilia, you guys are going to be our big rock stars now and take over the show. Cecilia, if you are comfortable with it, I'm going to have you go first. Okay. And Christina, if you want to, I know the questions are posted there, but we'll read the questions. And then Cecilia, you can take it away. And then when you're done, we will have Daniel.
Okay.
How are you doing today, Cecilia?
I'm a little bit nervous, but
that's okay. That's okay. We're here to learn from you too. So
okay. So the how I learned about Arise is there was a day where I was like stressing, like I was like, oh my God, I need help with my essay and all that. And then I was like, you know what? I went to the Student Disability Center, to the office, and I was like, and I asked, I'm like, hey, do you guys have any, because I need help, I need assistance with my essay. And they were like, oh, like, yeah. So they walked me over, and Haley was actually available. She helped me like with the format because I was like struggling, and I was like, you know what, like, and then since then, every single day I'm at the RES's office, and it feels like, I don't know, I really like the environment. It feels very stress relieving. And I just sit and I like focus and I finish my work. That's my goal. Every time I come in here, like I say to myself, I'm gonna finish my homework. So when I go home, my focus is on my daughter and what else?
But not only that, Cecilia also, she does come in every day. She's a very dedicated student and she works on her assignments so diligently. And she also helps out though with some of the social groups. So we get a lot of students that come in from NOCE and they want to talk and they've just come out of their class and they really want to just like get all the wiggles out and stuff. So Cecilia has been really helpful with the socializing with them and letting them practice how to introduce themselves to her. And so she's also been a big asset to our office.
Yeah, and then some tips that I do would like to say to the other students is a planner. I've never ever had a planner up until this year that I started college. I was excited to use a planner. I was like, you know what? I need a planner. I need a good planning so I'm able to turn in my work on time. And every time I get something or an assignment, that a professor gives me, if they tell me, oh, do it on, like, they assigned it on Wednesday and it's due like next Monday, I do it right then and there. So I'm like stressed from having so much work to do all at once. And I try to do like, the easy work first and then the harder work, a little bit, right after. But a planner is a must, and just, staying focused is the most important thing that we need to do. Like, and yeah, a planner has helped me in every other way.
I think Cecilia one day will probably teach a class for our students on how to be organized because she has got it down to a science. So you should be very proud of yourself for that.
Thank
She
you.
works really hard. Thanks, Cecilia.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cecilia, for being with us today. All right. And then next we have Daniel. Hi, Daniel.
Hello, how's everyone's day?
We're doing great. Daniel, they can't respond back because they are all muted, but I'm doing great, Daniel. You guys can put in the chat. And Daniel, your smiling face always just makes everybody, even if you're having a bad day, that's one of the great things about you, Daniel. You make everybody's day a little brighter.
And they're all saying hello, but the first one to say hello was Haley. I know you and Haley have worked really closely together, so she's shouting you out from the chat, Daniel.
Oh, hello. I missed you all.
All righty. Are you ready to share a little bit about from your perspective, your experience
Yes,
with the RISE?
if that's okay.
Please. That's why we're all here.
Okie dokie.
All right.
Hello, I'm Daniel Ramos, and I'm the type of guy who likes to tell jokes, brighten up their day, and I love to meet new faces because I'm the type of guy that likes to,
make people smile.
Yes.
Yeah.
Make people smile.
Absolutely. So, Daniel, how did you first learn about RISE? Can you remember all the way back? It's been, what, 5 years?
Yes. To be honest, it has been 5 years now, and I can't believe time flies already.
It does. It definitely does. So,
Well,
how did you first hear about the RISE lab?
Well, to be honest, I never heard about it until the grieving of my mom passing away. I was really, really down, really, really shy and scared to speak to everyone how my feelings, and I wasn't really an open guy, but But some of the teachers have told me that I didn't know that there's a thing or class called Arise to that we all can hang out in lunch or during break time. And I heard it from Alli, Allison, and I heard it from other teachers. I forgot. I'm sorry. and when I went there for a bit, to be honest, I was I knew something good was gonna come up because to be honest, they were gonna cheer me up and they're gonna brighten my day to help me move forward. And to be honest, I wasn't gonna go again, but I forced myself to go because who doesn't like good things, good vibes, and good things around them. I know I sound cheesy. I'm sorry.
Nope, you're being honest, and many people I think have been there. So I appreciate you sharing and being so open. So you first learned about Arise from some of your instructors. You shared that you were going through some personal things and you were looking for a space to kind of, I don't know, maybe step out of class. And what did you go into Arise for, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I went there, I went there to help me control my grieving, my sadness, and help me to become an encouraged guy to be open to others, to try to to be honest, I was a shy guy. I was like lurking in my own shadows, but now I'm not.
Now here you are.
Yeah.
You're telling a group of people that are here to learn from you. So look at you. Okay,
That's
so
why
perfect.
Seen the face. That's I'm here.
So let me ask you another question. So that's how you initially started using Arise. Nowadays, I feel like you are the Arise. I mean, we need to get you as our Arise marketing team or something. So what do you do in Arise nowadays?
Well, what we do nowadays, mind if I start from the beginning a little, if that's okay?
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you. What we were doing, that we usually talk about our problems, and we usually talk about our feelings, alone. But now I see everyone, like they say, coming in and they want to talk alone. But they made a great idea, like making a group by having everyone in a circle talking about the problems and how they're feeling, and we're not alone to be doing this stuff.
Yeah,
We're
being
like,
able to process your experiences.
yeah.
Yeah, because even though we don't have all the same experiences or things going on in our life, I'm sure there's some things that are kind of connected. So it's probably good to hear if you're open to sharing. I love that, would maybe make me open to share as well.
Yeah. And to be honest, I was scared to be open, but when they made a group, it was really relieving and comfortable. I'm happy, open now. I'm like, and we're not alone. We're all this together.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And plus, it just feels like we're one big happy family when we're just laughing about it, and then we laugh about it later.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, Daniel, Daniel's taking a morning class and an afternoon class. And when do you typically go to Arise during your day?
Well, during break time and then lunchtime and then break time again, lunchtime. I know, I go there often now.
There you go. Perfect. Okay. So we've had a couple students that have started that are new, or either they've switched from online to being in person. And Daniel's the guy who will wait for them during break time or during the lunchtime and invite them to go to the Arise lab. Right, Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I didn't want to keep this all to myself, like feeling good in a Rise lab. So they gave me an idea to bring and lure some people into a Rise lab. So I say, come on, friends, come on. It's a happy day to go in the Rise to talk about what we're going through, but we'll laugh about it later.
There you go. There you go. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, so the next question, I feel like you already answered, but I want to give you an opportunity if you can think of something else, is how has Arise helped you? So you've already shared that it helped you feel like you belong, you were able to process and get through some things that are really challenging. I also think you've sort of said this, you've made some friends as well, right? You said that
Yes.
you're in your shell. Okay.
And then it's like we know each other now, and even though we were afraid to talk and go to each other alone, but the Arise will just help us like almost everything. they just brought us together and know each other's name, talk a little, and then after we get used to it, and then we started like laughing and joking. That's the thing I love.
Yeah. And what do you guys do now on Wednesdays at Wilshire?
Well, for Wednesdays, we're now gonna play like a group game, like any kind of group game. We how do you say? We will think, but we gotta make sure it's appropriate and right for everyone.
There you go. Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't been privy to any of those, so I guess that would be a KC point. But yeah, so they've the students have organized these games that they're going to be doing on Wednesday. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that you guys have advocated for the social groups and for the game days, and you've made it happen, which is incredible.
Yeah. So
Okay.
basically, I just find it like home, even though it's not our home, but I feel like it's home, like you're home already.
Well, good. I mean, it's for students. So there you go. Okay, I have a question. It's not on the slide, but I think you and I have kind of talked about this before. So I have a question for you. What would you tell a student who's maybe brand new to college? They're just showing up the first day. What would you want to say to them? What would be some advice?
I would say, "Oh, hey, you must be new here," and greet them. "Hello, my name is Daniel. It's where are you from, if you don't mind me asking?" And where did you graduate? And I'll say, "That's terrific. I'll show you around the NOCE place to make you feel like you're welcome here. And I'll take you to Arise where you can feel more welcome here."
Perfect. Well said. Okay. And then are there any tips or suggestions kind of along the same lines that you would give a student? Oh, we already did that. That's incoming with a disability. Okay. Same question. I just wrote it in my notes, totally different.
No worries.
All right, Daniel, are there any other tips that you would maybe tell? It doesn't have to necessarily be a new student. It could be any student.
To be honest, age don't matter. It's just a number. Anybody
Okay.
can go in there. Anybody can go in there and be happy and feel relief as one part of the family. In a Rise, though.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, not in a stuffy old classroom, right? You got to get out, go to Arise. I'm just kidding. That was a trap. I didn't mean to set you up for that. You're fine. Okay, Casey, is there anything else we want Daniel or Cecilia to talk about?
You guys covered it. I think that's you guys can have my job. You guys are awesome. So thank you so much.
I was thinking the same
dang.
thing. Cecilia, when you were talking about using a planner, I'm like, great, I need to get you in my classroom. You can teach all the students and myself how to use one.
It's the best. I love it now. It's like my best friend.
That stuff is definitely a challenge to start with. So that's great. And I love that it's working for you. So yeah, thank you for sharing your story. And Daniel, you're definitely you're an inspiration to other students because you are open with your experience, talking about some of the things that you've gone through and how you have how you've grown, I suppose. And you're also very open. Like I feel like if there's ever a student who's having an off day, I try to notice it and kind of tune in and figure out what we can do. And you're already like 5 steps ahead of me. Hey, you want to go to game day in the Arise lab? So it's wonderful.
Yeah. And there's some other stuff you can use to, help you with your stress. They have some unique little stress balls or string pulling or those little water things that you can put upside down. I forgot what those called, but I like them.
Perfect. Yeah. And there were some questions in the chat that were, and I'm very sensitive to sound, Daniel. So some of the fidgets that make a lot of noise, I'm like, squirrel, what is that noise? But there's other fidgets that are pretty quiet, right? Like the squishy ball that has like the little, I don't know, it looks like a hedgehog kind of. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like some of those you guys will sometimes bring into class.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, you're amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you
Thank
guys.
you. Oh, don't butter me up.
Oh, Erica's saying fidget pens are great too. Yep, good
Yes.
point. Okay, well, I feel like we're all done now. The students said it best.
I know, I don't know how to move on from this because you guys kind of steal the show and are awesome. So thank you for being here. I want to answer really quickly a few of the questions that came through the Q&A. And Alli did respond to them, but I want to answer them live as well, just to make sure that we address those real quick. And then we always think like, there's no way this is going to take up 90 minutes. And then we get to the end and it's like, oh my goodness, we have more to cover. But I just really appreciate the student sharing and that I'm happy to have take the entire time. So one question that was asked is if we do a student survey to get feedback from our students. We have done them before. We also have like a data sheet that we keep track of data of students coming in. Erica is my data wizard and I would be lost without her. And poor Erica could probably tell you all the ways that I would be totally lost without her in the data world and really every way. But so we do try to keep track of why students are coming in, what kind of resources they're utilizing so that we have some actual measurables to share out. And then another question was asked about students that disclose that they have a disability, but they might not be registered with DSS. And are people allowed to then contact the DSS office? That's a really tough one. We can't disclose that, but if Alli made the suggestion, if you do have a student that has a disability or discloses that and they are not enrolled with DSS or DSPS, maybe even inviting a DSS counselor to come to your class and talk about accommodations and services. Of course, always suggesting to the student that they can seek out those sources. But yeah, we don't want to violate a student's confidentiality by sharing that if they don't want to. But one thing that we can do is offer the warm handoff. Hey, I'd be happy to walk over to the DSS office with you and introduce you to the DSS counselor or help you get an appointment. So just really encouraging the students to utilize those resources if we can do that to help them be more comfortable. Okay. And then I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our stress management strategies because I want to get into integrating wellness, and then Christina is going to share a little bit about collaborating on between the non-credit and credit institutions. But these are just some techniques, if you haven't already learned about, that you can go through and learn about, that we do with our students. Mindfulness activities, body scanning, so students can tell where they're carrying stress, finding those quiet spaces for students, mastering some of those breathing techniques, using music, aromatherapy, which you kind of have to be careful with that one because some students are sensitive to smells, and one student might love lavender and another might hate it. So something that Erica and Haley have done in our RISE programs is do like rice bags with different smells, and that way a student can have it and maybe smell it, but it's not going to bother the person sitting next to them because it's not a strong, diffuser type of a scent. Coloring, fidgets, journaling, just all kinds of different ways to help students learn to manage their stress. All right. And now Alli is going to talk a little bit about classroom integration.
Yeah, so I put a few things on the slide, and depending on time, and now I'm looking at it, we don't have a ton of time, so I'm just going to kind of go off of what we're looking at here. So first of all, I try basically at the very beginning, there's just the point that the instructor is a person of power. So I try really hard at the very beginning to recognize that, and also try to build a connection and rapport with my students. So whether it be online or in person, my number one thing is I try to put them in the space of control with the class. So we'll talk about some basic guidelines and things that work for all of us. One example that I can come up with for my online classes is Just for us, we typically have 2 Zooms a week. The first one, we go over the coursework that's on the learning management software. We use Canvas, and then kind of just an overview of that. And Zoom is really a tool. So it's not, I'm not lecturing, although each assignment I've recorded a video of me demonstrating how to complete the assignment. I also do like an introduction of the topic. So I'll go over that on Zoom, just that it exists. And then at the end of the class, we'll kind of say goodbye. I always make sure, we always have like a few stragglers that will stay on, they have something to share, they just want to wait until it's like actually closed out. But again, like I'm so glad that they're coming for this connection that I try to keep it open. So even though my class ends at 11:15, I'm probably not out of there until 11:25 or whatever. But we'll talk about, you know, at the very beginning, hey, what due date works best for everybody? So, you know, Zooms are pre-scheduled, those are preset, but if a class meets on Tuesday, Thursday, my typical due date would be Thursday at like 3 p.m. But if I have a student that's working and that doesn't work for them, then maybe we can work together and have Friday be the due date. So there's some things that we try to make sure that they're in charge of as well. And then on campus, we always open it up and we talk about, you know, breaks. So I love that Casey talked about, do we want to get out early or do we want to break? I believe personally that breaks are critical. At our campus, we saw a lot, well, at our school rather, that there was a lot of foods and challenges for access to food to our students. So we have these food pantries that are open at all 3 campuses, and they're offering, just the timing of it is like perfect for my afternoon class. And then also with this year, the free lunch program, the students have access to free breakfast and free lunch. So I try to make sure that my breaks are scheduled so that students can walk and get their lunch or get their breakfast, just in case. So they get like a 15-minute break, 20 minutes maybe sometimes, because they have to walk across the street to get the food, or going to a Rise. I want them to be able to, if they have to unpack something or relax or whatever, that they actually have time to do that. But we talk about it. It's like, do you want a 15-minute break? Do you want a 20-minute break? Do you want it in the middle of class? Do you want it closer to the end? Those kinds of things we'll talk about. And then online, I do not make people turn their cameras on. At the beginning of COVID, I feel like everybody had their camera on. And I really realized that it's almost a question of consent. There's so many things that are going on behind the scenes that we can't see, that I just wanted to make sure if they're comfortable. And then of course, for some people, they're not comfortable because they're looking at themselves or they're making eye contact and maybe that's not their jam. So that's always optional. And then as much as possible, I try to gamify things. So the word test, it has a negative connotation. There's so many ways now using like Kahoot or quizzes or even with Quizlet. So there's ways that you can have students take interactive tests. And it's almost, I had one student once that was like, you're like tricking me into taking this test. You're trying to make it fun. Like, yeah, you're on to me. Yes, but ultimately it gives you a score. You see, I like to do them even before. We do a lot of vocab, so I try to do it before the vocabulary test so I can tell like what we need to focus more on. But then that takes away the stress and anxiety that goes into that word quiz or test. Now I realize we're non-credit. That's not going to be the case in every single class. So we do have tests and quizzes, but trying to build up that confidence before we get to it. We already talked about the syllabus, so I'm going to skip over that. But for my online classes, I record a video of me going over some of the basics of the syllabus. We also do it the first day on Zoom, but you know, there's no way anybody's going to memorize that information. And then talking about, you know, classroom presentations. So other resources that are available. I'm going to use Arise as the example. I always invite Arise, and honestly, I feel like Erica and Haley will typically reach out to me. Hey, it's the beginning of the semester. Would you like us to come in? Yes, absolutely. So students that are new or that don't know them or don't know about Arise, they can see them. And that also opens up the door to that like soft or warm handoff that we were talking about. So it's not like, hey, you have to go to Arise. It's, hey, these are the people that you can go in and talk to if you need to, or, you know, we'll go on a tour. I try to give students a campus tour the first day of school. And we'll go into the Rise Lab and have them sit down and be able to see what's around and what that resource really looks like. And then kind of lastly, because I want to make sure we have time for Christina, is I try to ease them into the learning. We always do an icebreaker question. I have a game. If anybody's an instructor, there's a great game that's called, literally, it's icebreaker best self prompts. And they have 150 prompts, all kinds of different questions. I'll pass the box. I have it here. I'll pass the box down the row. Students can just pull a card. Some of them are relevant, some of them aren't. They can pull whatever one they want. I have another game that like gives you a name on a card and you have to describe the person and we have to all guess. So if it's a class that's maybe not super chatty, I'll try to do things like that where it just gets kind of the juices flowing. People are thinking, that kind of thing. My morning classes, especially now, I think people forgot. We actually have to get out of bed and put on clothes and get to school. So my morning classes, it tends to be a little bit quiet. And Daniel is in that class. So Daniel's pretty good at breaking the ice. He'll normally share first, but we'll have a question and just kind of ease into, typically I'll try to keep it so that it's on the topic of the class. So if it's an independent living class, it's like, what's your favorite room in the class, or a computer class? What's the emoji used the most? We had that one yesterday. That kind of breaks the ice and it eases them into the topic and whatever it is that we're going to talk about. So it's not just like, boom, you're in class, turn your brain on, we got to go. But still building up those study skills to make sure that, you know, that's there. So, and then also just, and we talked about this a lot, but the quiet time in class. So at the beginning of my afternoon class, that class can be a little bit more, we're just a rowdy group, I think, kind of punchy. It's towards the end of the day. And so that class, we have like a quiet activity for the first 15, 20 minutes. It's a computer class. We're working on typing skills and that, you know, on topic, but it's if somebody is having an off day, they can sit there and they can relax, or there's this quiet activity that we work on before we get started. So those are just some ways to kind of integrate it into the classroom. And I feel like this could also almost be its own presentation, but those are just kind of some basics. Hopefully that helps.
All right, so we're in the 10-minute stretch here. I'm going to talk about campus collaboration first. So depending on the type of campus that you're on, collaboration can look very differently. So I have had the opportunity to work both at NOCE and at Cypress College, and they're very similar, but also very different. So at NOCE, it's a smaller campus, of course, and their disability support services program is very cohesive. You have a lot of access to the instructors and the counseling team and everything. So collaborating with one another is a little bit easier, I would say. But when you get over to a larger campus, for example, like Cypress College, you really want to start with working with your disability support services office, obviously. So trying to find out, you know, what they've done in the past, any activities that they've done to support students, any specific people that they have worked with or collaborated with that you can reach out to develop an event or a program. You really want to get on any email distribution list that you can. I know that Haley and I have really worked hard. If there's an email list going out, we're like, who do we call and how do we get on that list? Because we want to know what they're doing all the time. We also have the added benefit of having not only a student, but another fellow coworker who worked in the DSS office, Diego, who kind of knows a lot of what's happening at Cypress College, what's happened in the past and what's going on right now, and knows where everything is on campus. So we really use him as a resource a lot as well. And then once you realize what other departments are doing, you really want to work on cross-promoting your programs. So reaching out to those people and just, you know, letting them know, hey, we have this program that we're running and we have these students that we're serving, and we really want to put up any flyers or bulletins or send out emails about any events that you're doing. And if you'll help promote our program, that would be great too. And people are really receptive when, you know, you scratch their back, they'll scratch your back. So that's really worked for us as well. And then that also helps to avoid duplicating events. So one thing, and I know Casey touched on this, we really want to start offering some events like yoga on the lawn. We've talked about like having a day of dance or a day of art. But then we've also found that there are specific times of the year when a lot of events are happening. So for example, in April, next week, we have Earth Week coming up. They do a lot of, there's a wellness collaborative on campus, and they do a lot of yoga events and mindfulness sessions. So you don't want to step on any toes that way, but maybe helping to promote that event and sending students that you serve their way can help to collaborate on an event in the future that maybe you might promote yourself. So that's really helpful. And then in addition, we always like to participate in any outreach that's happening either on campus or in the community. And Haley, Diego, and I, we all work at the Cypress campus. So we work together to really figure out what's happening on campus, who can cover it, how we can spread the word. And we've actually gotten quite a few students into Arise as the event is happening. For example, just yesterday, I went into the office and Diego was at an event, it was World Fest, and a couple of students came in that had just finished talking to him, and he had done such a great job about telling how wonderful Arise is that they had to come in and see it for themselves. So that was a really great way to just get people to come in and see what we offer on campus. So you really just want to participate in any tabling events. And that includes anything on campus or even off campus. So participating in any outreach that's happening on Zoom is also really helpful, which, as we know, a lot of things aren't in person right now, which is really convenient with Zoom. So some of the challenges that we've had on campus is, like I said, NOCE and Cypress are a little bit different, where NOCE is much smaller. And so figuring out who to contact for things is a little bit easier. But at a community college that might be a little bit larger, you might have a hard time narrowing down who to contact. So one thing that we did is we just started looking at the campus website, and we contacted all of the department heads on campus and just gave them a simple email of who we are, what we do, students we serve, hours, and then asked them if they wanted us to come and speak in their classroom. So Alli mentioned that Haley and Erica will go out and reach out to all of the instructors at NOCE and let them know that they're ready to come in and present to the classes about what's going on for this semester. What events are we having? What are our hours? We did that as well for the Cypress campus on the at Cypress College. So we just reached out to all of the department heads, sent them flyers and links to all of our virtual offerings that we have for the spring semester, and let them know that they can disseminate that information any way they see fit. So they can send it to other instructors, they can post it to their Canvas, they can let their students know in class, in person, or we can come out and give a presentation in the class too, or on Zoom. We also reached out to all of the Associated Students clubs. There's quite a few of them at the community college, and then also to different centers like the health center. We like to collaborate with them and cross-promote their activities. Visibility is another challenge. That's an ongoing challenge, not only because we're still coming off of the pandemic, a lot of things are on Zoom. And so I feel like when you don't have that personal connection with students where they've met with you, they've been in your office, it can be a little bit more challenging to get them to come into a Zoom because they're like, who are you and what do you want? So that's been kind of a little bit of a challenge at the community college. We're working on signs, and I actually think that we created some handmade signs. So we had some whiteboards that were offered to us from the DSS office, and we just wrote a little bit about Arise on those whiteboards. And because they're different on campus, there are quite a few students who come in because they're like, what is this sign and where am I going? So they'll just come in to see, what the office is all about. So you have to be creative sometimes and come up with ways to point students to your office space if you have it. which finding a space on campus can be really difficult. And I understand that. That's kind of tricky in any educational institution. I feel like whether you're working in the K through 12 community or at post-secondary, finding space is always an issue. So I know when Arise first started, they were kind of working out of backpacks. So they would find anywhere on campus, whether it was a bench or just a quiet space, an open space to meet with students and just, you know, help them de-stress or talk to them, help with socialization, stuff like that. So they would really get creative with wherever they could meet with students. And then also it's important to provide a clear definition of your services. So one thing that we've come across is that sometimes people get really confused with the words emotional health. And they think that emotional health equates to providing therapy, which can sometimes step on the toes of different offices on campus, for example, like the mental health facility who is meeting with students. And because we don't have a licensed mental health therapist in our office, if anybody comes in with any mental health needs, we like to point them to the health center or to any virtual therapy that we have or community resources that we have available to us. But just being very clear about what types of services you offer to students is helpful. Casey mentioned that we don't offer tutoring. That's also been something that can sometimes be difficult and lost in translation. So just letting people know that, you know, we're working on organization and helping students with their syllabus, but we don't offer specific tutoring on assignments or anything like that. And then just, you know, letting people know that you're working with students to help with very specific issues that they might be having, stress related or working on their social skills and things like that, but not specifically behavioral issues. So you just really need to hone in on what services you want to provide to students to make it clear to others on campus so that when you do go out and send emails and try to collaborate with other departments, they know exactly what type of students they can send your way.
All right, thank you, Christina. And I know we ran out of time and we promised to offer a Q&A at the end. And Will, we're probably stressing you out here. So I don't know, we can stick around and answer questions if anybody has it. Well, I don't know if we can leave it open for a few more minutes, but we're wrapped up. That's what we had wanted to present, but we did want to offer if there's anybody that had questions they wanted to ask, I can stick around if that's an option. Yes. Okay. So thank you guys so much for coming. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll stick around for a little bit to answer any questions you have. Oh, contact information. So yeah, I will put my information in the chat. Oh, Haley, thank you, Haley, just for Arise at NOCE. That email address goes to all of the Arise staff, but I can, and I was going to also put my email, but there goes Haley being on top of it. So thank you, Haley, for that. So csousa@noce.edu is my email address.
So sorry, may I officially thank you before everyone exits? So thank you so much to our rock star students, Cecilia and Daniel. Thank you so much for sharing from the wealth of your lived experiences with our community college professionals, community partners and others. And thank you to Casey, Alli, and Christina for your wealth of information that you shared with everyone. Again, if you have additional questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please give us your feedback by clicking on the SurveyMonkey link that we've inserted into the chat. And yes, please feel free to answer questions if you have a couple of more minutes to do so. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Will.
So in true Alli fashion, I'm 4 minutes late to class, so I'm gonna jump off. But it was good to be here and thank you so much for having me.
Good to see you, Alli.
Okay, I don't see any other questions coming through the chat yet.
I think that's because you were really good at answering them throughout, which is good.
Hopefully. We'll answer all questions except for from Even. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us and sticking through that whole presentation. You were awesome. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
You were amazing, Daniel.
You are a
Thank
rock
you.
star, sir. You are a rock star.
Thank you.
Next time, Daniel, we'll have to do one that involves more of you. I'm already thinking of ways that we can do more student-led presentations.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I feel like that's what people really want to hear about is the student perspective, right? You did a great job.
Yeah. All right, I have to go do things.
So
I'm
much.
sorry.
I think we can call it a wrap. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.